Okay, I've been wanting to stamp out a certain image for a long time in the form of this Watermill Lg stamp. I haven't used this for quite some time, and I've been wanting to test it out using the spring kind of foliage types of color schemes on it, and I don't know, just kind of bringing that element into this scene. I haven't used it in that fashion before. Probably some others have, but I thought this would be the perfect type of element to use with that. Okay, so I just colored it up with black, and then I used some Marvy olive brown here. It could be any kind of green, just to add a little type of green tinge up there. I don't know if it's going to show up at all. Let me try a little bit more. This one's olive, I believe. You kind of stroke it like that, and what it does is some of it's removing some of the black, and then it's applying some of the black. It just depends on how wet your ink is on your stamp and how wet your, how juicy your pens are. If the pen is really juicy and the black is a little bit drier, then more of this will apply to that, and vice versa. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to use this in conjunction with this Babbling Brook, so it'll look something like this. Okay, maybe I'll put it over in the corner, a little bit off center. But this Babbling Brook will be put down below, a little bit more downstream type of thing. Okay, so plenty of pressure. There's a lot of surface area. If you've watched my latest videos on brairing your stamps to get the impressions, that's a pretty good bet to go with a stamp like this, just because it has so much surface area. You wouldn't brayer. Well, you could with the wood, but if you have the unmounted version, it's a lot easier. You just lay it down there and just brayer right over it. And I don't know, that's a really good option for these stamps with a lot of surface area. Okay, you know, and something like this, it doesn't print on the inside if you don't use enough pressure right here. But you know, if you just have the unmounted version of it and you just place that rubber down there after inking it up, you can roll it across, or you go paper to stamp, and then you just brayer it like that, and you really have to use very, very little pressure, I'm finding, and it gives you a really good impression. In fact, I don't know, I might move over to that methodology when it comes to these large stamps. I love my wood-mounted stamps and whatnot, but I don't know. I mean, I don't have problems getting the impressions, but you know, you want this to be, you know, as easy. The entire process as easy as possible, you know, for everyone. Okay, so this is just being laid down about like so. I could go all the way up. Maybe I'll go all the way up there and kind of overlap into the watermill a little bit. I mean, you can overlap. I'm talking about 1/8 of an inch. You can go 1/8 to 1/4 inch. So there's plenty of leeway right there. Plenty of tolerance. Okay, there's a lot of surface area on this one too. I put a lot of detailed marks into my designs. I try to define everything by shape, form, texture, volumes as much as possible, and that requires a lot of little dots. The more dots you have, the more resolution, the more detail. The more you want to describe your forms, you know. You don't want it to just be, you know, these little kind of outliney blocks. Otherwise, what happens is designs that are kind of missing a lot of information on them, they kind of look more like a caricature of a form, be it a rock or something like that. And all rocks should look a little bit different, you know, even though some of them could look the same, you know, but when you, upon further inspection, they're all kind of unique. All right, so I have that. I, you know, stamped 2 of those across there like so. And now let's fill this area out. Okay, this will be the, as far as the coloring process goes, I think this is going to be the really fun kind of aspect to this piece. It's that spring foliage. I don't know. We have the subject matter of the the Watermill, but it's really going to be in heavy competition with hopefully, the colors that are used, you know, to round out this scene. Okay, so we're just working on the compositional format. Okay, so this is the tree cluster large stamp. This is also included in nature set number 7 with the chapel large. Okay, same thing. I'm putting some greens into these trees here. There's a deciduous tree in between these two evergreens, so the deciduous one, hopefully, right in the middle there, will have some kind of pink blossoms or something like that. So yeah, I am drawing right onto that black with the pink there. It won't be a pure pink, but it'll just give me kind of a head start in terms of the coloring process. Okay, I'm masking off some of these rocks down here, and I'm going to put these trees kind of, I don't want, maybe I'll have them a little bit lower in the composition, about like so. You know, so I won't have too many of these trunks here, so it'll look like something like they're in back of those rocks, farther back in the distance, as opposed to growing out of the rocks if I have this higher up. So I always say you use just portions of your stamps for whatever application you want them to be used in, okay? See that right there? I didn't use this whole bottom portion, so it looks like they're just kind of farther back, or they're just kind of embedded into the rocks, okay? Now I'm going to do a lot of stacking with some more trees up here. I can use the same ones too, or I can go with the smaller ones like that. That would look a little bit farther back. This is the tree cluster, small, and then there's also the maple pear, which will be pretty good too. Okay, so let's just, I don't know, let's just do this the same way. So every time you re-ink this, unless you're going to be doing some trees that, you know, are a depiction of trees much farther back in the distance, re-ink it in between impressions so that the second impression will come out much, much lighter than the first, unless that's your intention, like I said. If you do imagery that represents, you know, objects that are much farther back in the distance, then they can be lighter, and they would push that idea of distance coming into play. Okay, so what I think I'll do, these ones won't be too far distant because this one's the same one as this one, but I think what I'll do is I'll wipe off the bottom of this one. I'll go up about midway, okay? So I'm taking off a lot of the ink off the bottom, okay? Or all of it. I tried not to ink up those chunks because I knew I wasn't going to use that portion. But as I'm going up here, I'm taking up a pretty good amount, right? And then I'm using less pressure on this paper towel. So it's going from drier down here, a little bit less dry, and then it's going from, you know, wet to dry in a transition. Okay, it just doesn't go from wet and then super dry right there. It's kind of wet, medium, drier, dry. Okay, so we have this transition, and hopefully it'll print out dark to light because it's wet to dry. Okay. All right, so I don't know if I really need to mask, but I'll just mask just in case. But that's, you know, that's the extent of the masking you'll need. And maybe I'll off-center that a little bit from the previous impression of this stamp underneath it, okay? Just so it doesn't look so symmetrically stacked. Oops, I didn't press hard enough right there. See, I had this like that. All right, so this is what you do. Okay, so there's that stamp. I mean, that could be some mist or something like that, but here. Let's do it with some green right here. I'll just print up this tree. I just printed up that little bit right there. And let's mask off. Okay, let me under-mask a little bit more, like about like so, okay? And we'll just put another tree right in there. Okay, let me use a little bit more pressure. You got to use a little bit more pressure around your mask, otherwise it's, you know, it is a little bit of a, you know, a gap in there. So I just put that tree right in there, and that little bit right there will just be some fog, which I'm going to be adding into the scene anyway. Okay, let's do the same thing back in here. Okay. Let's go with something like this. Scenic stamping, I don't know. If there's a more kind of forgiving genre of stamping, I don't know. You know, if you miss something, then you just re-stamp it right over the top of it. Especially if it's like an element. If it's a person, it doesn't look really good, you know, to re-stamp. But if it's like a tree or something like that, you know, it just doesn't matter. Okay, so wet to dry. And I just did this one in green, okay, so it'll look farther back in the distance, hopefully. Okay, let's not even mask right here. Okay, see how kind of that looks a little bit more distant. And then I wiped it from the bottom to the top, so it's a little bit lighter down here, and it transitions up into darker. And it's lighter where kind of it goes, you know, behind this tree. So this tree, you retain the silhouette of it a little bit more when the objects in the back of it are lighter than it. Okay? Yeah, let's go for a couple different greens just for a little bit of variation again. Wiping off. I don't know if I inked enough down there, but who cares? Okay. Like that, masking off the roof. I came into that roof a little bit with my mask. I stamped out a little bit of my tree onto it right here, but that'll just be like a shadow on top of the roof of those trees. Okay, so see that right there? Dark to light, wet to dry. And see how that's kind of creating that depth. Just, we're going to create additional depth using, you know, the different colors that we blend into the scene. But this is just, this gives you a really good head start on that. You know, if you can have the kind of the depth inherently in the impressions, in your composition, you know, in the imagery, then you don't have to work so much in the coloring process to achieve that depth. Just have it inherently in the scene. And then it's just like, then you're just kind of doing more kind of enhancing of what it already exists. Okay. See that right there? That really kind of blended down like that. That'll be my mist. I'm going to do a lot of white pigment ink work in here. And let's go... I'm trying to think of how high I want this to go. One of the things that I do, I always kind of pay attention to, I don't know if I'm going to use this maple pear one, but one of the things, I'll use the smaller one though. One of the things that I like to do is, when you're doing something like this, okay, this is what people don't think about a lot. And sometimes I don't think about it either as much, but see this shape right in here, this white shape of the negative space? You want this space in here, okay, the shape, okay, of white. You want that to have kind of an interesting shape itself. Most people are kind of focusing on the imagery, okay? But the negative space can be just as important in terms of kind of a subconscious type of attraction to this space in general. Okay, ideally you want this space to be just as interesting in terms of a shape as the positive. Okay, so you can see this undulation happening in here. Okay, so think about it, you know, I don't know if you're going to think about it equally, but definitely you want to consider it. Okay, I'm doing the same thing on this one. I'm kind of wiping it off from bottom, and I'm wiping it off from the top a little bit too, so we'll have, you know, some of this light coming into the scene from up above. Okay, so let's take a look at this scene in terms of the negative space in here. Do you see that kind of negative space right now? There's a little bit more variation. It's not just going all the way across. I think having this dip down here is kind of interesting. I was trying to think if I should go. Okay, this is what they call huffing. It's where you breathe on this to get a little bit of extra moisture. I haven't done that in a long time, and I usually didn't do it back in the past either. But you breathe on it to get that other impression. You get a little moisture on the residual ink that's still on there. And let's see if this stamps out real light. Actually, I got a pretty good impression out of it. It's not very much lighter than that one, but see how we're building that depth right here? And see, we still have that nice negative shape right within that space. I don't know, I'm liking this lighter version. Let's see if we go really light. I'm really doubting this is going to print out very much, but let's see. Yeah, not too bad. Look at that. 3 impressions out of 1 inking. And it's not just being lazy, you know, the lighter it is, the farther back it looks. But I think that looks pretty good. Let's just go with that right here. Okay, so let's start coloring this scene. I was thinking on this one, what I might want to do is I might want to utilize, I think I want to go a little bit more alcohol pen, I don't know about dominant, but equal parts pen coloring on this one. Someone was pointing out a scene they really liked on the channel. It's where I did a lot of gel pen coloring of some autumn tones, and I used matte paper. It was just the backside of a glossy cardstock, and it was a lot of alcohol pen and gel pen work. And I don't know, I completely forgot about that one, at least in terms of the technique. And I don't know, it got me thinking I should do that. Okay, just a wadded up little paper towel, right? I don't know, I should get a bigger piece, but let's just go with this small one right now. Memento, Summer Sky, just any kind of light blue ink, okay? And blending this in like so. I'm kind of smearing some of those trees a little bit because they are a little bit moist still. Okay. Alright. I'll leave some of this little horizon down here, just white, okay? I'm not just trying to fill in this entire sky, I'm kind of giving it these I already forgot that name. I haven't done a video in like, I don't know, it's like a week and a half. It feels like I haven't done one in like 2 months. But these kind of streaky types of applications up here, you know, it adds variation. Okay, and I'll bring this right down into these trees. Okay. I can go into the mill as well, okay? I'm going to be bringing in some brown tones into this mill, but I find that if you bring some common colors across all forms, at least in terms of the lighter colors, there's just this nice continuity that's created between all of your objects when you have similar colors used, which represents similar colored light, okay? For example, if this was a sunset scene, you'd have warm colored light, you know, shining on everything. You know, you'd have your oranges and, you know, reds, browns, whatever, you know, yellows in here. Okay, now on my water, most of the flowing water, I like to have that illuminated, okay? It creates a visual passage for, you know, the viewer's eye to travel up the stream, so I leave those. Sometimes people think of water and they think, okay, I'm going to color all this in blue, but it's not really like that. If you look at a waterfall, it's not like, you know, colored in. It's, you get that churning water, and it's, you know, it's white with oxygen and, you know, bubbles and whatnot. And having it light like that, again, these areas of light, again, it creates this nice visual passageway into the scene. Okay, so anyways, You can see this paper towel works really good, and I mean this one color right here has really established a lot of the lighting scheme of the scene. See that? How light is kind of, shining on different areas. There's this oscillation of light and dark. We have variations of light and dark within that sky. Okay. Let's go with kind of a medium blue right here. Okay. Oh, striations, that's the word I'm looking for. Kind of going for that, so kind of leaving some streaks. A very light touch on this, okay? You can go a little bit heavier in the darker areas where there's more, applications of that color, but when you start moving into the lighter areas, like in the middle, just use much lighter touch, like you're applying, some kind of delicate powder or something like that on something. Okay? Alright, coming down here into the water, we'll go into the shadows and some of these rocks. The rocks and designs all have that inherent shading that's been applied to them. I've added tone and texture, sometimes it's texture in the form of tone, into my designs. And that's so that I can establish lighting and volumes and lights and darks within the scene. Okay, so that being said, you can just look at the design and you see where there's darker areas on your rocks. Well, what I'm doing is with color, I'm going in and I'm reiterating those. The areas with the lightest areas, like within the rocks and the falls, I generally leave those as is. Or if I do bring some color into those areas, it's not a real dark color usually, okay? See that though? See, hitting these areas with a little bit more shadow like that, it really kind of creates these nice volumes in the rocks. They look more three-dimensional. But you know how I was saying there's shadows in the rocks? There's shadows on the base of the rocks, okay? On the top side of it, they're usually lighter, so I don't color in those areas. Just, use this as a little bit of a coloring tool like that, if you want to. Just, I don't know, find your whatever stroke is the most comfortable for you. A lot of times it's not some kind of big change, If I go like that, it's not going to be any big change, but it's through this kind of continuous color additive process where these colors build up a little bit more and more, and then get darker, okay? But like I said, one little thing, it's not really any big deal. But that it does that, things aren't so sudden, that's a good thing, because it means you have a lot more ability to control the application process, how much you've applied. You won't be surprised or shocked at with an kind of an unexpected, unintentional mark that's also undesirable. You just kind of build it up slowly. All right? So anyways, you can definitely see the light and shade, interplay of light and shade in this scene. I have a little bit of London fog here. Let me switch applicators here. All right, switching applicators, it means, what do we do here? There, I switched my applicator. See? You just go like that. And you have your applicator ready to go. Okay, this is great. This is London fog. I don't know. I'll put some of this on the rocks. It's going to be very, very subtle in terms of, what this looks like. I can tell it's there, sitting right here. I can tell a little bit of a change, so. And again, see, I'm kind of hitting it in my darker areas for the most part. This is a really light gray, so you can put it in some of the lighter areas, but see how that water is really starting to stand out now? The darker you take the area around it, the more the lights stand out by contrast. let's put some of this onto the mill. Put a little shadow on top of some of the roof. There's some brickwork right there. I'll leave some lighting on there. Okay, let's see. Let's go in. I know you all like your distress inks. Let's use a little bit of antique linen on this piece, okay? Antique linen's one of my favorites. It's a really super pale value, and it works really good because I can establish my kind of lighting in a scene with it, but it also isn't, it's so light, it's just not a big commitment to that given hue. Alright, so see I've kind of gone over my mill there. I like it in my rocks too. Gives them a little bit of a warmer tinge, even though I've already put a cool blue down. Maybe you could put it in your water too, a little bit of a warmth. Wouldn't be bad. Let's put some of this up here in this mist in the background. I don't want to put too much because I want to use some white up there. As a matter of fact, maybe I made it too colored up there. Alright, so it looks pretty good. Let's see, let's go with this walnut stain. The walnut stain seems like it would be a pretty good one for that mill, huh? I mean, it even sounds like it would be good. Walnut stain, right? I'm going for kind of a more of an aged look on this mill. Not so much like a working, current one. I want it to look a little bit more kind of weathered and antique. Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. I was just trying to decide if I want any of this on my rocks, and I don't think I do. Okay. Let's go into some black here. There's other colors that I can still use, but I'm thinking I just want to go. I don't want to, go with too many multiple tones in here. I think it's already kind of getting in this area that I want. Okay, so when you're going to black, naturally it's going to be much, much darker than what you've been using so far. So just use a much lighter touch. Maybe take some ink off, so you're not going with such a dark ink, you're going with a drier one. Just to get a feel of it, okay? Anytime you make a jump from something really light to, quite dark. Or it can even be medium, to a lot darker. And black is just, it's just about as dark as it can get in terms of your inks. But it also depends on what you're applying it with. If you're applying it with a soft media applicator, it might apply very soft, so it'll be like you're applying like a gray or something like that, a dark gray or even a light gray. Okay, see how this is kind of rounding out all these different shaded areas and forms. See how I'm putting it at the base of some of these rocks in here, leaving the tops of the rocks lighter. So that really, how it really gave kind of a nice base to those waterfalls. I'm looking at that mill. I think I want that mill to be casting a little bit of a stronger shadow. So at the base of this, kind of taper it too. Okay, I'm going to be putting some darker tones. It'll kind of ground it into the scene too. When you add shadows at the base of objects, it sits it into the scene as opposed to making it look like it's superimposed over the scene, like it's floating. it anchors it. It gives it visual weight. It gives the object opacity, meaning now it's casting a shadow, as opposed to just being kind of hovering right over the top of it. So that right there, it's kind of anchoring things down a little bit more. Okay. I'm going to be doing this a lot with the pens too, so. But I'm just going to get a nice head start using the inks here, the dye-based inks. All right, I think that looks pretty good in terms of, defining light and shade, the volumes, the lighting scheme in general. All right, let's see. I'm grabbing out some pens in similar hues to what I've used, okay? So you don't need to know the specifics, but what did I use in here? I used browns, right? So these are kind of brown tones right here, and I've used blues. We can go in and add some kind of interesting extra elements, like with a little bit of green, maybe a little light green, to maybe add moss on some of the rocks, something like that. You can go into, some of your darker browns. These are Shuttle Art and Le Plume's, any kind of, marker. You can use Le Plume or Combo watercolor ones too. It doesn't have to be alcohol. Alcohol's kind of nice in that when you lay this down over the top of the water-based media, it's not going to smear it, okay? But, if I didn't have those, I'd be fine with, if I didn't have these, I'd be fine with Le Plumes or Tombos, and coloring in with those ones would be okay. Just, if you have some kind of wet areas, it might drag it a little bit. Okay, so underneath the eaves, on the mill, kind of going along with the grain of the wood. There's some wood down here too. Okay, see that? Kind of go with, instead of coloring the whole thing, you just kind of, you treat the wood a little bit different. Some of the planks are different color, like that. So instead of treating it, you want to treat it as a whole, or see it as a whole, but you also want to give individual kind of character to some of the boards, just so it'll break up some of that monotony. And this here, I can get into this wheel here a little bit better than, with a paper towel. On top of the roof. So variation, give yourself some variation. Okay, let's see. And this is like a camel biscuit. Work your shadows, kind of develop the shadows a little bit darker. This one's really too light, but I just lay it down like that. This one looks like rust, coffee. And then what I do is I just go and I blend that darker tone in with a lighter one, kind of before it sets up. It doesn't completely go back into solution, but enough to where you can kind of blend it out. So this right here, I'll kind of just blend that in a little bit like so. Okay. Let's see if I have something a little bit more brownish gray. I think I always like that color. I don't plan out, when I'm doing this, I don't think, oh, I need that brownish gray. I just kind of look and see, some lighter tones, some darker tones, or something like that. And I just kind of grab whatever first one's over there on that I see. So things aren't necessarily formula, like a formula for me. But if you kind of just know the concepts, don't just grab one value of a certain hue, I want this mill brown. So you just grab one brown. I would grab all, I don't know if I'd grab all the browns, like I have I don't know, 100 and something colors, but, there are many combinations of it that would work, so it's not just one type of thing. And if I was to do the scene again and color this, it would probably look completely different, because I'd probably grab, different pens the next time. Not by design, but just, circumstance. Okay, here's some green. Get a little bit of green, a little bit of glowing moss. It doesn't look like moss or something like that, but it just gives it that little tinge, And the thing about pens is you can get much more specific areas if you want. Like, say, for example, there's some areas on my rocks that have a little bit of a texture to them, textural changes, which represent volumes and cracks in the rocks. And I can get in there using something very specific, like a marker, as opposed to something more general as a wadded up paper towel. And like in my water too, some of those areas just didn't get, they're stark white, but you can come into it with a very light blue and add a little variation in a couple of these areas, like this. This is a really pale blue. It's really super juicy, but you can barely see it. Okay, alright. Now I haven't forgotten about my fall foliage. I don't have a lot of it in here. Maybe I should have used the maple pear in the background, okay? Because I have all this deciduous in there. So I have some very, very pale print versions of this. So I'm going to go with some really pale pinks right here. And I think I have a few. Cosmos and pale pink and pale lilac, okay? Now I plan on using some of my paint pens in here too, so I can go a little bit, I can go darker than what would look good with just the pens, just because I'm going back into it with my other paint pens, which will reclaim some of the lighter things. Okay, so let's try to zoom in here a little, or a lot. Okay, I'll try to keep my work on the screen. Try to remember, especially if I haven't done this for a while. Videos, I haven't done a video. What feels like for a while, at least. Okay, so you see those little pinks right back in there. Let's add some right down here. So this little space, where I didn't stamp out that thing, I'll just make that into, we'll suggest there's a tree in there. Okay, now this pink right here, even though it's pretty pale, it might be a little bit brighter than what I want. So let's go to a lighter version. Let's go, this one's actually called Pale Pink. Let's see if it's a lighter version, and it is. This pen might be getting a little bit dry. I don't think they have re-inkers for these Shuttle Art pens, but these pens are like 50 cents, so. Alright, now we have these areas in the back here. I'm kind of using this little scumbling method, okay? It looks like this, as opposed to just filling in some kind of whole thing, okay? And I think that it's just a little bit more conducive to kind of that, the spirit of the object in which I'm coloring. There's going to be this kind of oscillation of kind of light and dark throughout there. Okay, you see those all pinks throughout, and there's little hints of it right back in there. See how subtle it is? It's one of the good things about having just so much media and, potentially inexpensive media. I don't color pink in my scenes too often. It's very rare, but, if the pen's like, 50 cents or a pack of 88 for 40 bucks, it's, you can have these different colors that you just don't use very often. And it's not a big investment, and, your crafting allowance or whatever you set for yourself. You can just have it. So I have tons of colors that I just never use, but if I want to, they're there, I don't know, maybe I use them a little bit. Okay, this is Pale Lilac. Now the Shuttle Art ones are 50 cents. I think these ones are about, I don't know, $2 or something like that. The Marvy La Plume permanents. Okay, I'm going to put a little hint of this pink down here too. So let's put a little bit of pink into the mill. It's not that I want a pink mill, but what I'm doing is I'm creating a little bit of continuity between these colors out here and the mill. Okay, same thing down here in the water. Maybe we can have a little bit of a hint of some of this pink in a couple little areas. It's almost like it's, that color is just kind of shimmering in the light. Do you see that pink down there? See how subtle it is? But look at it on the overall. It's not like you say, oh my god, there's pink rocks down here, or a pink mill. It's just that it's, there's a little hint of it shared. See how it kind of resonates down there? That's also one of those things about the analogous colors, kind of the blues, transitioning into violets. It creates a little bit of a color glow, maybe, in those areas. Okay, so let's see. There's so many media possibilities when you're doing these types of colored scenes like this. And sometimes I kind of forget about things that I have here. So here's lilac, lavender, pink rose, and white paint pens. Okay, these are all paint pens, so they all have that kind of mixing little bead or whatever, BB, inside all of these. And you have to shake it up each time you use it, unless you're using it just like every day or something like that. Even if you let it go for a couple days, especially with the white ones, the Miaosun white paint pens, you really have to shake it up to get that a nice opaque mark of that paint, because the paint and binder kind of tend to separate with non-usage. Okay, so these are all, I don't know if the Miaosuns are water-based. They're waterproof, so I guess it's not water-based. I don't know. Okay, let's see if this one's flowing here. I should probably get a set of these ones, another set. I've been using these ones for years. The Sharpies. They came in a 5-pen kind of lavender set. These are extra fine Sharpie paint pens. Alright, now I'm adding this down to these trees. Okay. The pink trees. So we added the pink in with the alcohol pens. I'm going in and adding some pink in a very targeted way. It's a sharp pink application, because I'm getting these little pink little dots in here. All right, and we'll use some more down here. I think it looks good, like, you know, like some of that foliage is floating downstream, and it could be very subtle as well. Let's add some of these down here. Add some of it down in the water, like that, like these little petals. Maybe some are on top of the rocks. Okay. All right, here's lilac. I mean, lavender. I'll kind of add that maybe on the bottom side of some of these branches. I mean, you really can't tell hardly, you know, but just in general, I'll have these, kind of some of these limbs toplit. I'm not going to put too much of this. Is that like, you know, 45 seconds worth of application, or 30 seconds, I don't know. Just a few dots here and there. I want it to be more based around the white and pink, okay? All right, let me see here. Every time I shake it, I usually kind of wipe this edge here, wipe the surrounding. And these are all those spring-loaded style, but don't press on here and, depress the spring, otherwise you're going to get a big blob of paint probably coming out. Although I haven't had that happen with these ones yet, but I could see it, could potentially happen. Okay, so kind of the top sides of the these branches in here. Just in general, I don't know. You don't have to be, it's not really an exact type of thing. It's kind of more of a, it's almost like an impressionistic type of application of media in these areas at this point in time. I mean, there's, kind of definitive forms in terms of those trees, but kind of what's happening in between them isn't so kind of distinct. So in other words, you can just kind of put these white dots wherever, and it just kind of looks like this overall kind of shimmering light, that's happening back there. Now I'm going to do that splatter painting technique on this. I might as well. I wasn't planning on it, but I thought, oh, we have waterfalls right here. And I feel like I haven't done a scene in a while, so might as well do all the techniques. Okay, I'm putting some highlights on tops of some of these rocks right in here. So you put that little highlight on the top of the rock. It might be a dot, or it could be much more. You could put, a line or something like that across some of these rocks. You can build up a little bit, and it just, it creates more dimension in those rocks. They look more three-dimensional that way. My preference is to have zero kind of perimeter lines. I mean, like with the watermill and stuff like that, it's kind of hard to get around not having a line up on top, but I prefer to have these lineless, outlineless results. So lines tend to confine and make things look a little bit more flat. So if you want them a little bit more theredimensional, you can kind of, if there's some designs that are drawn with lines, then you can try to eradicate it with a white pen. But on mine, I try to, have it, absent of line, and the tops are defined by textures like that, There's a little space right here for that line, but, overall, see, there's no lines within this space. So that's why, these objects look a little bit more three-dimensional inherently, and it puts a lot less work on you as the stamper to have to kind of, define form, when it's just so much easier for it to be inherent in the design itself. Okay, so a little bit of detailing on this mill here. You can kind of add some of these to line work, roof work, whatever. That top of there like that. These windows. I won't put too much detail, but doing these little things like that kind of are really fun to do, and I don't know, I think it adds to the overall. Okay, so cotton balls and white pigment ink. I haven't forgotten about the opaque white, but I think we'll do this first. We'll add our misty type of application. So this up here, I think I'm going to do a quote stamp up there as well. It's just having that open area. I tend to go darker up there, but with all those really light trees, I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be more kind of bottom oriented. But that being said, maybe some birds and a quote or something like that would be really nice. Okay, so where do you add this? We're going to add this in these areas where light meets dark. Okay, I have a video on this aspect of it. What we want to do is we want to transition it, though. We're going to have a lot of this ink right here. And then as it moves out in the darkness, you use less and less. Okay, so you create these transitions. So start tapping and kind of getting the feel of it. And see that right there? Okay, so I haven't moved out too much yet. Okay. There we go. It's creating that kind of foggy type of mist, created by the churning waters. And in adding something like that, we're really introducing kind of a soft element to the scene. But you're not really adding anything, you're just kind of altering what you already have down there. So look at that dimension on that waterfall right there, on those rocks. It looks like a different imprint, right? And you're just taking advantage of what you've already done by just altering a portion of it. So this is one whole rock up here, right? Or waterfall. But look how different it looks down here now. There's just so much more deeper space. See this rock right here? I mean, it looks okay as is, but you can kind of integrate it with what is represented down below. So you have this cloud of waterfall, that churning water, this mist being kicked up. Now you've integrated that rock into the spirit of that churning water by putting that in front of it. And look at that. See from a textural point of view how that really kind of adds to the I don't know, the variation on texture, lighting, you can say, because it's adding light into it. And look at this. This is some kind of fog or mist at the base of some of these trees. Okay, it's because there's a little area of light like that I've retained. See right down here? So you add this pigment ink where light meets dark. You don't have to do it everywhere, but those areas where that does exist, where there's a little bit of light, it does create an opportunity if you want to do it. If the whole thing's dark, then you probably wouldn't have this mist like this illuminated unless it's like bioluminescence or something like that. Okay, this area right in here, remember where I said that was light? Back in here, this is going way back now. When I stamped this other tree in there to fill that in, I said, okay, that'll just be some fog back in there. I'm going to take advantage of that area where it didn't stamp out, and there was this light area by adding some of this fog right in that area, or mist, or whatever it is. Okay, see that right in there? Okay, same thing down here. This is a kind of a big bank of fog. I'll put some on this tree right here. Don't be afraid to turn your card in the direction where your process is the most, comfortable and conducive for that. You don't always have to keep your scene upright, okay? I can get to this easier by just flipping it upside down. But look at that tree right there. How different is that now? See, but I've utilized that part of it where it's kind of fading off on the bottom. Now I've put some of that up here. So it fades out because it's wet to dry, but it's also fading out a little bit now because I've added some ink over it. But I gave myself a head start. I don't have to do so much work with this, being that a lot of these trees are light already. They're inherently light from my impressions. I could have made them darker, but I just have to apply a lot more ink to lighten them up, you know. I used to make them all, you know, a lot darker than I thought. Why, you know, that I'm having to apply so much more of this pigment ink? Just why not make them lighter to begin with, and I won't have to do so much at that point in time. See how everything's kind of taking this soft type of look, you know, in here. Let's add a little bit down here around that little light area. Transition it off a little bit. And maybe I'll put the mill in a little fog as well. I'll kind of come up into it a little bit. Doesn't that kind of make that watermill feel like a little bit more integrated now? You know, because it's kind of being, you know, encompassed by all this, you know, this moisture in the air that's influencing all the other objects. So you've influenced this by the same type of element, which is supposed to be illuminated fog. You know, it's illuminated moisture. There's light hitting that water in the air. Okay. And as you do this, what it does too is it kind of starts to darken after a while. When it dries, this application of media isn't quite as light, so you kind of have to keep reapplying it until you get what you want. So just go with another coat right over the top of it. Okay. It's kind of good in a way, you know, because there's a lot of control over this. You know, you put too much and it's like, oh, I didn't really put too much because when it dried, it's darker. You know, it doesn't stand out as much, but I don't know. It really allows you to kind of manipulate the surface and how much application of this you're applying to the point of whatever extent of influence it's depicting. Okay, I hope you understood that. I'm not sure if I understood that last statement either. In other words, there's a lot of control, you know, when you're doing something like this. When you think you've added too much, if you're doing some sort of process where what you've done is lessened through the process of drying, in this case, it really gives you, you know, a lot more time to get whatever kind of atmosphere you're going after, in this case, right, okay? Now, sometimes I do add too much of this, though, and I just kind of dab it off with my finger. I mean, you can take even a paper towel and wipe the whole thing off if you want to. It's like, oh my god, I added it over everything, you know, and it looks bad. Then just wipe it off, if it's on glossy cardstock. If it's on matte cardstock, it doesn't come off quite as easy because it sticks. But with glossy, you can kind of, you know, you can do it. I love it on, you know, media that where it sticks too, like on photo paper. It doesn't, you know, it kind of sticks a little bit more. But it also applies faster too. So I don't know. There's some benefits to that as well. Okay, so anyways, you see that kind of in this frosty misty type of effect. And what are we doing here? We're adding lighting in a very soft manner and in a very diffused manner. What this does is it adds lighting into a scene in a very defined manner. Kind of in the spirit of the, the white paint pens or white gel pens. Okay, I think I need to add a little bit of water to my Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White. If you like Scenic stamping, I'd recommend getting a bottle of this. One bottle of this can, if you use it like me, it'll last you 20 years. Which one of my first bottle literally did. You know, because I don't go around spraying every scene with it. But it sure is great for stars and waterfalls, and I don't know, I can even use it as like a camera flare, like you're looking into a camera and like around a sun you can have some of this kind of splashing out, and it's really just fun to apply. Okay, so old toothbrush with kind of a syrup-like consistency. Maybe I made this one a little bit too diluted. The thinner this paint is, the finer the spray. Does that make sense? You know, just because it's just not so thick. Okay, so now I'm holding this up. I don't hold this up as a technique. I'm holding it up so you can see what's going on here. Okay, so base of the waterfalls, right around here. Okay. All right, see that? Doesn't that add a nice texture? And it's a very crisp light in there, okay? And it is light, it's reflected light. It's the light that's hitting that, those little sprays in the water are reflecting back. Okay, see that right there? So it's just a little small texture, but when you look down there, it adds a little nice kind of movement. And I'm just I like it as a textural element, so it doesn't make sense, no, but if I just spray this a little bit around here, I can even spray it back in here too. I just like it as an element. Maybe it's pollen or something like that. If you have allergies, I hope this isn't offensive, but you're safe inside, maybe looking out of this scene. Or how about this? It's a non-allergenic pollen in this location. How about that? So anyways, I don't know if you can see that texture around in here. You see that? It could be, like little petals, those blossoms kind of, being caught in the wind as well, or something like that, the breeze. Okay. Okay, now I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a quote, but I think I'd like some additional foreground in here as well. I'm going to see if this is kind of my go-to stamp. I don't know, lately, it's just Leaves, 399E. I've really spent a ton of time on this one, figuring out the visual density of the leaves and the balance of them and how they'd be used in a scene like this. And it works great as an overhang or coming in from the bottom as like a bush. Okay. All right, let's go with the VersaFine. It's just going to be a much, darker black than just about any other black, especially if you're going over the pigment ink of the white pigment ink and all that little texture in there. Using the Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White, it's just Dye-based inks, it might work, but I don't know. The pigment ink is just so much heavier. And the VersaFine really gives a beautiful dark impression. And we'll go for a few impressions of this. Okay, so look at that dimension that creates. This will act as a nice framing device, okay? Meaning it'll frame off the composition nicely, having some darker elements like this. And it kind of creates a kind of an intimate kind of vantage point for the viewer. You know, it's like they're looking into the scene kind of from some location, and we're putting this kind of foliage right next to them. So you have something really close to you as well as, distant. And it really kind of brings your attention right to that mill as well. Everything's kind of, this foliage is kind of almost pointing at it. Trying to think if I want to go with more down here. Let's add a different element. So I don't want to get too much repetition. I always use this one, but it always works. And that's reeds. Okay. Reeds large, I should say. Change the angle and height of it a little bit. I like to leave a little bit of space for the viewer's eye to enter the scene. Okay, now I need to pick out, I think a quote and a bird up there would be really good. So I'll have to figure it out. Let me go. I'm kind of leaning towards one of them. One of them was, it's talking about color and spirit, I think. But we have a lot of space up here for just about anything, so let me figure that one. Okay, I think I found something. Yeah, it's this one right here. Nature always wears the colors of the spirit. Ralph Waldo Emerson. And, like I said, it fits right up there. I could do that in Marvy black, or I can do it in the VersaFine black. Maybe the VersaFine's a little bit too dark. Maybe if I do it in the Marvy black, it's not quite as dark. It'll be a little bit more recessed. I think I'm going to go for that. I mean, you can do this. That's not that dark up there. I can do it in blue too, but I just think it would match better with just with black. Okay, let me do. What I do with these scenes, quote stamps, is I do a couple test impressions. Just inherently, when I'm stamping, I find that when I'm taking photographs too, I always have this little tilt. There's a certain pull, to my work, so I know I'm always a little bit off. Just in general, I don't know why, but it is. Okay, so I can't see this. My camera's right in front of my head, so there's a ton of space in here. I'm not worried too much about centering. I want it generally centered, but okay, that's straight enough for me. If I measured it down, it might be off, but I don't know. For me, close enough. If I was off a half, a quarter inch, it would kind of bother me, but okay. So here's some little birds. I think I'm just going to do them. Well, let me see. I'm going to do them in a second impression black. I'll go one impression, then I'll go down here, like this, or up here. Just so they're a touch lighter, okay? All right, so let's see what we have here. We have a decent amount of dimension up there. I don't know, hopefully those trees look farther back in the distance to you, and we have these layers coming through here. Far, kind of mid-ground, foreground right here with these trees. And hopefully there's a nice kind of textural range in here of the dark, close, crisp objects against kind of the more diffused and lighter background images. Okay, now look at what happened right here. See this image right here, you know, with the Babbling Brook. I mean, this was stamped in black. You know, that was a lot darker in here just in general. But I guess I don't know. I went, you know, pretty crazy with the white pigment ink, but it pushed it back there. I do still, you know, the base of some of these rocks down here are still reasonably dark, but it's just to come to show you what you really manipulate the different objects with that white pigment ink, and it really changes the spirit of the impression, you know, like that when there's so much variation, or just the toning down of the definition of some of those areas within the design. So what I'm getting at is this design right here, in terms of the value of it up here, you know, the darkness, looks a lot different than this back portion of the design. So you can just by toning, you know, putting that white pigment ink over the top of this, it really changes the spirit from the bottom to the top, near to far, okay? Just by playing around with that pigment ink over the top of it, the white pigment ink. All right, so it's just a really fun process, and I'd really recommend it. But, and again, look at the white, Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof white splashed in here. And see, you can see it, even see it up here. Yeah, there's, you know, some splashes right around in here too. But it kind of looks like, you know, like maybe those petals are kind of falling around in there. It's just this little twinkly kind of a little effect within that space. And the quote, you know, the quote looks pretty good up there in terms of, you know, just putting kind of a focal point up there in that space. Okay, so anyways, like I said, return to stamping, even though it's just been like a week or something like that, or a week and a half. It feels like a while. I've been doing a lot of other things, getting caught up in inventory and all kinds of things and whatnot. So, hope you liked that scene. I really had a good time getting around to something that I've wanted to do for a while with the Old Mill Lg. Someone had just ordered that, and I said, hey, I've been wanting to do that, so I thought, okay, I'm going to do that right now. Just get around to it. And then what I really wanted to do is adding these pink kind of background things. I want them a little bit more prominent, though. I think I might want to do this one again, but with some more of these pink trees kind of in the foreground here, so it's kind of sandwiched in between, you know, some surrounding pink spring types of blossoms and whatnot, and maybe flanking, you know, this body of water. I think that'd be really good. So I don't know, that won't be the end of I'll keep that stamp out on my table here for a future scene. Anyways, thanks again for watching. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. If you like this video, I hope you like the click on the like button. All right, thanks again.